Hello and welcome to the Nutrition Digest podcast. We are your hosts and registered dietitians Alicia Kugler, Tara Valenti, and Summer Williams. On today's episode, we have our first guest, Aaron Goldman, a mindset and mental performance coach with over 20 years of experience. He's based out of Ashland, Oregon, and founder of PLAYfreesport, a platform that provides training sessions, seminars, and workshops, as well as one-on-one consultations for youth, athletes, coaches, parents, and teams in order to help unlock their full potential in their performance environment. Aaron, we are so stoked to have you here.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here. That was a great intro.
So I think the first thing that would be the most helpful thing to dive into is what a sports psychologist is, because I've mentioned that we're having you on to so many people, and a lot of people are confused. Like, they've never heard of a sports psychologist, or if they have, they're not quite sure what that entails. So can you enlighten us?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I have to get out of the way, just for professional integrity, is that I'm not a psychologist.
Okay.
I studied sports psychology, but I'm what's called a mental performance coach. And there are people in the field of sports psychology who are clinicians, who do clinical mental health work, and there are people who don't. So I'm one of the people who does not. But in general, what we do is we support athletes or people in any performance venue really on their journey through their chosen area of what is most important to them. So people in my field work with musicians, they work with dancers, they work with athletes, they work with CEOs, they work in combat sports and the military. And so it's a pretty wide-ranging application. And I would say that the thing that ties it all together is that what we found is that performance skills are consistent through all of those spaces. How do you show up sort of when the lights are on? Mm-hmm. And so that's part of what I do. I work mostly with athletes who are between middle school and college, and we spend a lot of time talking about mindset skills, but also for me, my background is actually in more the life skill development arena. That's what my master's is in. It's in a field called applied human development, which sort of ties together the sociology of sport and coaching and neuroscience and all that, and kind of wraps it up with a nice little bow. So that's what I do. And I spend a lot of time in performance spaces, but often what I end up talking with people about is what's going on in their life.
Well, I know for a lot of us, we kind of talked about this before, and I know it was feedback when I was telling people that we're going to have a sports psychology professional coming into our podcast. They're like, well, how does this apply to me? I'm just an everyday person that maybe does something athletically, does something in the fitness sphere. And they're like, how does that actually apply to me? And how can that actually benefit me? Because they're like, well, maybe this episode isn't relevant to me.
Yeah, I think, don't we all have to perform in our lives? Don't we all have jobs to show up to and relationships to engage in and people to show up for? A lot of what I do actually is work with parents of athletes, working on ways to support their kids to thrive rather than, sport parents get a bad rap. Some of it's deserved, some of it's not. I think it's all related. I think that those everyday people who have things that they have to get done, spaces that they have to show up in, I think that those skills are universal. I decided to focus on that more than the clinical piece. I know enough about clinical psychology to refer people if it comes up that they need it.
I love that you kind of translate it to every aspect of life, because oftentimes when I have clients who are struggling with a goal that they're striving for, I take it back to a goal that they've achieved in the past. And it's not necessarily a goal that is related to nutrition or fitness or performance in that realm, but in any other aspect of their life, like getting a college degree or getting a promotion at work or leveling up in some other capacity, because we can use the strategies and the tools that they use to level up in that category in this very different category as well, because there are so many parallels.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about goals. For me, goals are really about what are you doing every day, right? What are the small habits that are going to lead me one step down the path toward whatever that big thing is. And if I stay focused on that big thing all the time, my attention is not on what I'm actually doing to get there. So I love that. And we all do that every day. We have little things and big things that we all strive for in our lives. And so, yes, is it mostly applied in the realm of sport, or is that kind of the sexy thing that people see? It is, but it's really just an open door to talking about how we move forward in our lives.
That makes sense. One of the things that really stood out to me when we talked before this call was you talking about replacing the word should with replacing the word could or can. And that's something that I've even, tried to take into my daily fitness routine or something like that when I don't feel like doing it, but also something that I've talked to my clients about as well into nutrition. You don't have to do X, Y, and Z. You don't have to eat these awesome foods that maybe not as sexy or fun as a massive pizza and a burger and all this stuff, which again are not bad. But what you do have the opportunity, what you can do is choose something different. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and how that kind of language can support a more empowering mindset for athletes, but also for the rest of us as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Should is a word of expectation. And whether those expectations are realistic or not often doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with the people holding those expectations. And so when I say that I should do something, where's that coming from? Should according to whom? The other thing about that is that we often use language that associates should with things like shame. You should be ashamed of yourself because you didn't do whatever I thought you should have done. Okay, but that has nothing to do with me. That expectation, or I should say, if I'm the person placing the expectation, that doesn't have anything to do with you. That comes from me and my perspective and my experience and my background and my values and beliefs, which may be relevant to you or may not be. But what happens is it places a really narrow definition of success on you. And so all of a sudden, rather than you sort of having an open path and open horizons and you getting to choose what success means to you, I've now narrowed it down to one thing. In sport, we often retrospectively talk about a game that we should have won, or a match that I should have won, or a race that I should have run better. And maybe I didn't perform up to the level of what I'm used to or what I'm capable of, but should isn't relevant, especially when you're looking at the past, because it's already done. And all that does is it puts me in a space of regret and shame, and it keeps me stuck. So if I replace the word should with the word could, if you're talking about something in the past, I could have run that race better. I could have won that game. What that does then is it opens up an analysis of what happened objectively that prevented me from doing that thing that I could have done. Was it how I prepared? Was it that the other team or the people running around me were just really good? Did someone have the race of their life? Some of those things had nothing to do with me, so I can dismiss those because that stuff always shows up. But the things that I could have done better, I can then take and use as information to improve moving forward. If I'm looking at something in front of me, well, I really should do this. So a lot of people, I imagine, listen to this podcast because they're interested in food. I should eat this and not that, or I shouldn't eat this. Okay, that might even be true if you have a medical issue or there's something about that food that really isn't good for you, then okay, maybe you shouldn't eat it. But it doesn't actually have to do, the change doesn't have to do with whether that should is accurate or not. It has to do with how I approach the choice. So if I shouldn't eat that pizza, maybe I shouldn't. Although I was just in New Haven, Connecticut, and if you're in New Haven, you should eat pizza. You don't have to say no to something because someone else tells you that you should. I could eat this food that I know is better for me. I also could have pizza when I feel like it. I can choose to do one or the other. And what that does is it creates empowerment, creates a sense of autonomy, a sense of controlling my own destiny. And sometimes all we need is that feeling of, I have some choice here. In youth development, it's called voice and choice. So what we do for kids is, rather than telling them what they have to do in a space, we say, what is this space about for you? And how can we help create a space that you feel good and you want to come back to? In youth sport, in after school programs, in PE, that's one of the things that we try and do. Well, we can do that for ourselves. We can give ourselves voice and choice. And as practitioners, we can give our clients voice and choice. So if you love pizza, then find a way to eat some pizza every once in a while. But maybe it's not every day. What can you do to help yourself feel better? You all put a question in the stuff that you sent me that I hope we get to, talking about like, how does this relate to questions about nutrition, and how does this apply for people who are really struggling to make that choice to change how they eat? I hope we get to that.
I mean, I feel like you just provided so much great, very useful insight into the strategies that can be implemented for shifting the mindset. And I think that what you were just describing ties directly into what we were going to ask you about in terms of the opportunity mindset and what that is. It really is just shifting how you talk to yourself, the language that you use. But if you want to dive deeper into that kind of opportunity mindset, I'd love to hear more about it, because I feel like we talked about mindset before a little bit, and how absolutely critical both mindset and identity are in behavior change and achieving goals. But I think it's just such a valuable concept.
Yeah, the opportunity mindset, I can't claim that I invented it, but I think often in psychology, and I think other fields are this way, everything is building on everything around us, right? Like I hope that people take what they can use from others and use it and sort of transform it and use it in their own way. So what I realized is that there's this sort of dichotomy between the fixed and the growth mindset, which are the ones that people know about. It came from educational research. Carol Dweck at Stanford, there's a book about it. It's really good. And there's lots of stuff that has come out of her research. I think that sometimes the growth mindset is a little bit passive. It's helpful because it's a belief in my own ability to change. What the opportunity mindset does is it takes it from, okay, I believe that I can change, to what are my opportunities for improvement? And now I'm on the lookout. I'm actively seeking opportunities to grow, opportunities to learn, opportunities to take the information from my environment and my experiences and synthesize them into something that I can use to help me thrive more, help me understand more, help me be more aware, help me perform. And it is a lot about the language. And we sort of already got into it a little bit. For me, it's very much about curiosity and active curiosity. Like, what's going on right now? What happened? Why did it happen? How can I use it? How is it helpful? So yeah, that's sort of the opportunity mindset. And what I think it does is it puts us in an active space of constantly seeking ways to learn.
Yeah, we did an episode on all or nothing thinking and the concept of failing forward, and kind of approaching like kind of very, very similar to the opportunity mindset, where it's like learning from failure and using that information to come forward, and like shifting into that curiosity, or almost like a scientist observing, like seeing your life or your situations as a third party. Because I think a lot of us, it's very, very easy to fall into the trap of that negative self-talk and kind of falling like, oh, well, I screwed up. This didn't go as planned. Like I'm a failure. And it's very, very easy for a lot of people to almost have that as like a paralysis, that then they go completely off the tracks. I don't know if you see that with a lot of the people the kids that you work with. If something doesn't go as planned, going back to that should, but also just like even just that negative self-talk spiral. And then instead of like shifting to, hey, what are we learning from this? What are we taking from this situation? And building from there. Like, I don't know, like in terms of like negative self-talk, do you see that a lot with the people the kids that you work with, or the parents that you work with?
Yeah, we do a lot of catastrophizing. We're like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Or we do the opposite. This is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And often the truth is somewhere in the middle. One thing that I see a lot of is the mindset is different depending on what we're doing. So I had a conversation with an athlete yesterday, someone I've been working with for about a year, and she has this big goal. She's a college athlete. She lives that life and she's doing an amazing job with it. But she has this really big goal that she came into her college career with. And we're talking about the mindset that changes as you start moving towards this big goal. And sometimes we're very growth, very opportunity about some things, and other things we're pretty fixed on. Depends on the source of that goal or that information. It depends on how we talk about it day to day. And yeah, we see a lot of black and white thinking for sure. Try to help people move into the gray area a little bit. There's some uncertainty in the gray area, which I think is hard for people. This sort of unknown. But what the opportunity mindset does is it treats that unknown as something to look forward to because it's full of potential. The other thing that I really loved that you said was this idea of science experiments. I often talk to athletes about treating their own process sort of like a science experiment. My background is in science. My undergrad degree was in hard science. It's another story about how I ended up in psychology. But it's really useful to take an idea or a question and then workshop it. My hypothesis is that if I do this, this will be the result. And then you try it, you come up with methodology, and some things work and some things don't. But it does sort of remove a little bit of the emotionality from it. And it allows me to engage in the process with sort of a curious, sort of forward thinking approach.
Right. And I love that also because in science, if you experiment with something, it's inevitable that there's going to be some trial and some error. It's inevitable that you're going to see some failure, it's just expected. And you don't just stop being a scientist at that point. You formulate again. You try to figure out a different way. You test other things. At the end of almost every research study that you read, it says more research is needed. That's because we don't give up in science. We keep trying. So if you're looking at your own life, your own goal, your own self-experiments with a similar mindset, I think it can be helpful because you have more resilience, I think, if you're approaching it in that way.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think some of that resilience also comes from, again, how do I talk about it? Am I a failure, or did I try something that didn't work? And that's part of that black and white thinking and that catastrophizing. Like, I tried something and I failed, therefore, that's what defines me. I am a failure. Or am I a person who wanted to try something and it didn't work, but okay, I'm going to try something else? There's this identity question that comes up a lot, especially with athletes. I am my sport. When I was playing, I was a basketball player, and basketball was my life, and it was how I saw the world, and it was how I oriented, and it was the central principle of who I was. And when that ended, it was really hard because all of a sudden there's this empty space and I don't know how to fill it. We have to be careful about identifying with these things. It doesn't make them less important if I disidentify with it. It actually gives me more flexibility and more space to investigate it in a healthy way, and potentially can lead to much higher performance because every up and down on the roller coaster doesn't throw me for an emotional loop.
I can really relate to that. I'm sure our listeners know, I was in Cirque du Soleil for a long time. I was an acrobat. And even though it's been a decade since I performed, I have a really hard time not being in Cirque du Soleil. That is 100% how I've always identified myself. I am a performer, I am this, I am that. So that really makes sense, and especially with athletes, if you're used to being that, what happens when you're not? Or what happens if you are not the best, or your team didn't get first, or whatever. But I do really think that still can relate to a lot of our listeners in terms of our nutrition or our own athletic performance. And Terry, you said the word resilience, which I think is super, super important. How do we pick up and either figure out who we are. After that, how do we pick up when maybe we didn't meet the goals that we had set for ourselves, the shoulds. So Aaron, can you tell us a little bit more about that? How you help clients like build that mental resilience in your training and your coaching?
Mm-hmm. I think resilience is a word that gets thrown around a lot. To me, resilience is the ability to adapt. It's the ability to, yes, get knocked down and get back up, but also to learn from and adapt to the conditions under which you're playing or living or operating. The word that I really like is flexibility, mental flexibility, emotional flexibility. I mean, right? We talk about physical flexibility, but it's the same thing. What does physical flexibility, when combined with strength, allow us to do? It makes us more dynamic as athletes, makes us able to adapt to unknown conditions, things that come up, right? The demands of our sports. Psychologically, we have to be flexible. We have to be able to adapt to what's happening and the things that come at us in our lives. So when I think about resilience, those are the things I think about. I also think that resilience sometimes gets construed as something that happens naturally through challenge or through trauma or through hard times. And I don't know that it happens automatically. I think we have to take the opportunity. So in youth development came out of research in physical education, this idea of positive youth development. There was a man named Don Hellison who was in Springfield, Massachusetts for a long time. And his model started with underserved youth, and it's applied a lot to underserved youth. In the PE space, we have to be able to create something that is supportive for every kid that walks into that gym. And not everyone has the same needs, and not everyone builds resilience in the same way. So a lot of it has to do with the environment that we create and the conditions of that environment. We talk a lot about looking to create self-determination. The conditions, self-determination theory comes out of motivational study. Like, how do we create intrinsic motivation in people? It applies to adults, it applies to kids. So what you need is a sense of autonomy, a sense of belonging. Like, this is a space where I can show up and be myself and I'm safe to fail forward, as you said. And competence. Am I learning the skills that are required to take on the challenge that's in front of me? So a lot of it has to do with language, but resilience doesn't just happen by accident, because there are lots of people who go through hard things and don't recover, or they don't fully recover. So we also have to take an active role in building resilience in ourselves, building resilience in our clients, and teaching people to be a little more flexible. For me, I work with psychology, so I'm trying to help people be more emotionally and psychologically flexible in how they approach the things that are in front of them or the things that come up. I don't know that it's a perfect science, because you're working with people. It's really interesting coming from hard science to something like psychology, which is there's a lot more unknown, and there's a lot more variability because each of us is a little bit different. So resilience gets built through the combination of challenge and intentional work, is how I would describe it.
Aaron, I know when we were chatting before, you had talked a lot about your own resilience and building your own resilience through some of the injuries that you've gone through. And I know that's a common thing that we see with a lot of our clients on both the fitness and nutrition side. They go through this major injury. Something happens to them from a health perspective, and it feels like they hit a wall. And for so many of them, it's hard for them to kind of get over that and move on. And a lot of it falls apart. And I feel like people hearing your story, because I know you shared a little bit, if you're comfortable sharing, and I would love, because I feel like it would resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing all the sports. I was a pretty normal kid in that way, I think, for the demographic that I was in. I played flag football and t-ball and youth soccer, and I was on the swim team, and the thing that really stuck was basketball. I played a ton of it. I actually didn't play organized basketball in high school because the coach and I didn't get along. at all. So I ended up playing water polo, and that was the sport that I played in high school and college. One of the things that happened with sports for me was that it actually started out as a protective space. I was very tall, still am very tall, and when you're a sensitive kid and you're super tall, you feel like you stick out like a sore thumb. So like a lot of kids, I kind of walked hunched over and I tried to hide. And also I was sensitive and emotional, and there's not a lot of space for that for young boys. And sports became a place where I could walk in and all of a sudden the tall kid is the first one picked. People are like, oh, look at that guy. Like on a basketball court, I was 5'11" in 8th grade. I was 13 and 5'11", and you walk into a gym when you're that age and people are like, give me that guy. So it became this really positive space. And so I identified with sports as a way to feel seen, to belong. I worked really hard. I gave myself the competence. And along the way, it became this really central piece of my identity. What happened, though, was through other stuff in my life and still being a very emotionally driven person, sports also became very problematic. I've gotten arguments with referees, I got technical fouls, I externalized all responsibility for things that weren't going right. And I think I was probably pretty unpleasant to be on the basketball court with at times, because I did a lot of blaming. I did a lot of threat mindset, just the opposite of the opportunity mindset, right? Everything is a threat. So the bad call is a threat, and my teammates not playing defense was a threat, and me missing a free throw was a threat. And so sports took on this very negative aspect for me. And what happened was I stopped playing basketball when I was 32, not because of any of the psychological stuff, because I thought that was normal. I thought that suffering was how I knew that I was doing it right, that I was working hard enough, that I was putting in my time and the blood, sweat, and tears thing. And I stopped because I had a bunch of injuries and my body needed a rest. And within a week, I was sleeping better. My outlook on life was more positive. I all of a sudden was looking at other possibilities for things to do with my time. I could put more into my work. I was running a business at the time, and I had more time to put into that. My business got more successful. My work got better. And I got really curious about that. I was like, wow, all of a sudden you remove this one thing that you thought was so centrally important, but it turns out for me, it was centrally important for the wrong reasons. And that 2 months that I was going to take off ended up being like 6 or 8 months, because I kind of made the most of that opportunity before I knew what the opportunity mindset was. And I was also in therapy at the time. And so this was something that I talked about with the person that I was seeing, and we sort of dove into it. And that was me dipping my toe into the psychological part of sports. It ended up, you go to grad school in psychology and you are your own case study. So I also learned a lot through that. And I think the resilience that I built came from self-examination, and it came from awareness and paying attention and a willingness to dive into not just my own experience, but how I had participated and sort of created the negative conditions that were causing me to suffer.
I think this is so interesting, because as coaches ourselves, oftentimes we have people who come to us because they want to push harder, and they want to do better, and they want to do more, and they want to level up, and they want to just keep advancing. And sometimes that's what's needed. But other times we have to pause and really dig into what their patterns are like and what they're doing, and realize that the reason that they're actually not able to push to that next level or to get to where they want to be is because they aren't taking care of the other side, which it sounds like you fell into that trap as well. The focus is only on pushing harder, getting better, and not on taking care of your rest, taking care of your stress levels, taking care of work-life balance and balance with sport as well. And sometimes you have to deliver that news of like, hey, you actually need to dial it back a little bit. Like the answer to this puzzle, the piece you're looking for, is actually working a little less hard. And that can be a really tough pill to swallow for people who are high achievers and are striving to just, go to the top.
Yeah. And I was just going to add one thing onto to that, Tara. I don't know if you've ever experienced it, any of you, with any of your clients, that when they actually are putting that extra energy and time in, sometimes we actually see regression because they're being too strict, too rigid, they're being on top of things too much, that their body's fighting against them. And I know that I've seen that a lot in my practice. And it's always this phenomenon that people are like, what the heck? Why?
We live in a culture that glorifies exhaustion. It glorifies this idea of selflessness, like literally having no self, because you give everything of yourself to whatever you're doing, to the people around you and your job and your training. And so the first thing that I had to do was I had to step out of the grind mindset. And do we have to sometimes put our heads down and go? Yes, we do. But living our entire lives that way, it leads to burnout. It leads to regression. It prevents us from getting to our goals. I think looking at it from the outside, like you look at someone who just does nothing but go, and you're like, wow, that's pretty unhealthy. But when it's me, I'm just in it. And we have a totally different, even as practitioners, people who know, right? They'd say you teach the things that you need to learn, right? So of course I'm teaching people about the psychology of sport because that was something that I struggled with hugely. But that experience is gold because we know from the inside. So you look at someone who's just go, grind, work, train, and you're like, hey, you might need to dial it back a little bit. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I thought that this was how you did it. So a big part of what we do is teaching people that there's another way. And this idea of balance, I mean, I think we also have to give people more information about that, because when we think about, like when I think about work-life balance, I immediately think of 50-50. But isn't work part of life? Isn't training part of life? If I'm just me showing up to all these different spaces, then my work is part of my life. And my training is part of my life, and my sport is part of my life, and my family is part of my life. And it's all just my life. So then I have to see where all of those things fit in. And if what I want is balance, it doesn't necessarily mean equal amounts of everything, right? It's sort of the difference between equality and equity. Equality is everything gets the same, everyone gets the same. Equity is everyone gets what they need, or every area of my life gets what it needs. So it's like life equity, you can call it. And sometimes I have to train more. Like if I have something that I'm training for, if I'm training for a marathon, something I would never ever do, but I know that's something that people do, there's an arc of the training, right? There's your heavy load training, and then eventually you have to taper down as you get towards your event. It's the same thing for work. There's a flow to it. So this like work-life balance thing, it's all, for me, I think of it more as like the ebb and flow of all the different things that I have in my life. And sometimes I do more of one and less of another, but I have to make sure the overall balance allows me to give what is needed to all of these things, including recovery. One thing that I tell athletes is that recovery is part of training. It's not like you're training and then, like, athletes hate the word rest. They hate it. They're like, what do you mean? Yeah, I see, right? I see some recognition here. What do you mean rest?
I feel seen. Tara, you and I.
Alicia.
Because rest has been given this connotation of laziness, of like, rest means I'm sitting on my couch eating a bag of chips. Sometimes that's what rest is. That's really satisfying. Sometimes you just crack a bag of chips and you're like, yep, I'm going to see the bottom of this bag.
I think also like sometimes people can get into the trap of feeling like they have to earn their rest.
Yeah,
Like,
this brings me to the thing that I was really hoping we were going to get to, right? This question of like, how do people change their mindset about food? Because it's so difficult it's like one of the hardest things to change. So I think that we have learned to have a transactional relationship with ourselves. So my own approval has to be bought with whatever, eating properly 6 days a week. I have to earn that piece of pizza, and I can only have it, and I only deserve it if I do everything right throughout the week so that I can cheat.
The very, very strict Monday to Friday that everyone falls into, and then the Friday to Sunday that becomes a free-for-all. 3 days of just letting it all go.
And then you feel horrible. On Sunday, you wake up feeling awful, and you're bloated, and you feel disgusting, and you feel like you just want to sit on the couch and eat a bag of chips, because that's what you've been doing.
The cycle starts again.
And the cycle starts again. And it's all a transaction. It's problematic enough when the transaction is, I feel like I have to do certain things to earn the approval of someone else. As sports fans, we certainly do it. When our favorite players are playing well, we love them. If they make a mistake, we're like, well, that's not my favorite player anymore. Parents do it with their kids. I see it a lot in youth sport. Parents invest thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a year in their kids playing year-round club sports, which I think are ridiculous, and that's a totally other conversation. But then when their kid doesn't perform, even if the parent would say, no, I approve of my kid no matter what the kid perceives is they're not receiving their parents' approval because they didn't play well, because they didn't live up to expectations. So we have this total transactional relationship in our society in general, and then when we do it with ourselves, there's no way out of it, because it just turns into a spiral. So going from that to more of a transformational relationship, why is it important to me to eat well? What's it doing for me? Why is it meaningful for me? Not because my trainer said, hey, if you do this, it's really going to help your training. Or I'm talking to a nutritionist with all of this knowledge and they're like, hey, here's this amazing plan based on, okay, that's great and that's super helpful, but if I don't have an intrinsic reason for doing it, it's not going to work. It's not going to sustain. What's it really about? That's the beginning of a transformational relationship with myself. I can only love myself after I lose 20 pounds. What a difficult way to engage with the number one relationship in your life, the relationship that needs your most investment, the one with yourself. If that's a transaction, that filters out into everything else that you do. If I can say, I can start with, okay, what's happening right now? Like, where am I objectively? Okay, this is where I am, not where I should have been or where I could have been or where I want to be. Where am I now? Because that's the place you have to start. So it starts with self-awareness. Kobe Bryant said, it all starts with awareness. So you have to be really honest. And really, for me, mindfulness, which is one of the tools that I use a lot, has to do with objective evaluation in the moment. What is right now? Okay, then maybe the next question is why? Why is it this way? Then I start looking at my habits. I start looking at my conditioning and the things that I learned and how I grew up and how I was raised and my experiences and how they led me to where I am right now. And then, okay, how can I use that information to help me move forward? And it's all under the umbrella of, why am I making this investigation in the first place? What's this really about for me? What's meaningful about it for me? What would still be meaningful about it if I didn't have this really beautiful, comprehensive plan in front of me and I didn't have this person to help me in the gym and it was just me? Why would I be making this decision? So we start there, and that moves away from everything being a transaction. So I don't have to earn my cheat day. I want a piece of pizza and I deserve that pizza because it's delicious. And if I deprive myself and continue to deprive myself, it just builds and builds and builds. And then instead of having a slice, I eat a pizza. And maybe it's really enjoyable, but then I feel horrible. And then I feel like I have to go way back in the other direction and the pendulum swings, and then I have to do nothing but drink juice all week, and then I'm back, and it's like we do it all the time. So it starts with the relationship with the self. And food is really tricky because it's tied intimately into so many aspects of our lives and our history. It's cultural, it's familial, it's emotional, it's associated with really powerful memories. And so those associations make food both a really powerful medicine and also something that can be really problematic. And I think a lot of the things in our lives that are good for us can also fall over into addiction. Food, exercise, medicine. So we have to be really careful. And part of that balance and that flexibility comes with improving our relationship with ourselves.
I agree. I think making the space to dive into that relationship and actually devoting some time to it, because there's a lot of go, 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 have to get things done. Nutrition is just another checkbox to check off. I'll just track my food in a log. Got to make sure the calories and the macros are right, but not actually stepping back and digging into that deeper, much more complicated and emotionally driven side of food that, as you so eloquently put, plays such a enormous role in our day-to-day behaviors when it comes to how we nourish ourselves. I think a lot of times people think it is just calories and macros and math, and sure, yeah, we do that, but it's so much deeper than that.
Well, and for some people, probably that very analytical approach is great. Like, people want to see the numbers and they're like, great, this is how things make sense to me. But we have to be dynamic and flexible also in how we talk to people. We have to meet people where they are. The number one skill in coaching is to be able to present the same information in as many different ways as you need to for people to understand. So if I'm coaching a basketball team of 14 athletes, I potentially have to be able to explain something 14 different ways.
Yeah, I think we do the exact same thing in our daily routines with working with clients. I will say the exact same thing in a different way to every single person I talk to. And it's dependent on what their goals are, what they hear, how they learn, how their schedules are, and just how they absorb information. Because like you said, Aaron, some of my clients are very analytical. They're all about the data and the numbers. They have spreadsheets. And then other people are all emotional and how they feel. So it's trying to help people really help them to understand nutrition in a way that's going to work best for them, not as a punishment, but something to enhance their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And the relationship with the self, if it's healthy, tells them that they deserve that enhancement. Not because they had to earn it, not because it's some kind of transaction, but because they inherently deserve to be healthy and they want it. Alicia, you asked this question about like people do and they go. Do less. Keep it simple. It's not this like, okay, you have a spreadsheet and you have to do everything on the spreadsheet. Tara, right? You said like food is a checkbox for people. Maybe it's just, let's try this one thing. Let's try this one habit, this one mindset exercise, this one tiny step, this 1 degree change, rather than trying to go 45 degrees off in a different direction, because that's when you get the snapback. If you make a 1 degree change, you change one small thing, one small habit, it's much more likely to stick around.
And trying to communicate that to clients too is always an interesting conversation, because I think a lot of people, they expect we're going to give them everything all at once and they're going to change everything dramatically. And to explain this, like, no, we got to start slow. We got to start gradual. We got to build up those small things so that you can actually make them stick for the long term, so you aren't stuck in this vicious yo-yoing situation that you've gotten yourself stuck in.
Yeah, habits are about environment and they're about consistency. And the big stuff, if we just go big right away, it's not likely to last. It's not likely that we're going to be very consistent about that because it's too big a change. Human beings are designed for homeostasis, emotionally, biologically, psychologically, physiologically. We have a zone of optimal functioning. And each person's homeostasis, in the mental and the emotional stuff is a little bit different. Biologically, we're pretty consistent. And so if we make these huge changes, it takes us out of homeostasis. And the whole purpose of biology is to find its way back to that zone. And so if a big change is happening, sometimes we can stick with it, but often our evolutionary goal is going to pull us back into whatever zone we were in that was comfortable. And so we have to go small so that we can bring our homeostasis along with us into the new paradigm.
I love the way that you described that. So often people come to us with like their motivation is at like 110% when they first contact us, and we have to like bring them down to like okay, I know that you're really motivated right now and you want to change everything all at once, but I promise you that's not going to work. So like, how do we scale this down and create more of a gradual shift? Even though that's difficult to wrap your head around when you really want to like change everything today, because in the long run, it's going to be a much more lasting shift. So I think our time is just about up here. And I wanted to ask if you have any final thoughts or takeaways that you want to leave with our listeners who might be trying to take on a big goal or might even just be trying to make a small shift in their health behaviors.
It's kind of a hard thing to explain, the process of changing one's relationship with oneself. The recommendation that I can really make, actually, I mean, I know it didn't originate here, but if anyone has seen the first season of Ted Lasso, there's a great scene, a famous scene in the show in the bar when they're playing darts. And he quotes Walt Whitman and he says, "Be curious, not judgmental." I think that's really, really, really important, because judgment closes us down. It shuts us down. It's negative sometimes. We make judgments every day, right? I like this and not that. This is good for me. This isn't. I want to eat this and I don't want to eat that. So we make judgments every day, but value judgments can be really powerful. And they can often shut us down and close us off to possibility. I think of, like, when I think of it, I think of people like rolling inwards, or like a pill bug, like a pill bug gets scared and it rolls up in a little ball. To me, that's what happens to us when we do judgment, and it closes us off to relationship, and it closes us off to learning and connection. Curiosity is an opening to all of that stuff. I think a big takeaway for me is the more curious I can be, the more open to possibility and opportunity I can be, the more likely it is that I'm going to find my way to those small changes. The other thing is, I get to define what success means for me. So if winning is the only success, that puts me in a pretty difficult position. But if success is, I had a good workout today, if success is, I feel hydrated, if success is, I feel recovered from my long week because I gave myself the gift of going for a gentle walk, or I listened to a podcast, or I read a book, or like, we can be kind with ourselves and still achieve what we're trying to achieve. But it's not just all about achievement. The small successes are whatever I decide they are. And the more opportunities I can give myself to feel successful, the more confident I will be when the hard stuff comes along. What I've found is that really the most powerful things are the simple ones.
I love that. I think there was so much value in everything that we have talked about today. Alicia, is there anything that you wanted to pick Aaron's brain about?
I thought we were doing a roll here.
Yeah, first Olympic triathlon next Sunday. It's not this Sunday, but the Sunday after. I'm just like a little bit of disbelief that it's happening, because it's been a long time kind of building up to this point. And so is there any tidbits or like mindsets that I should be, like, I know my big thing for next week is actually just chilling out. I'm not good at that. I like triathlons because I get to do more. But yeah, definitely like that rest mindset. And I know for myself, in the past, when I've tried to put too much pressure on myself going into these scenarios, are when I actually don't do well. And so I'm trying to make sure that I'm going into the race just to have fun, or like embodying like, hey, I'm going to do as best as I can do, but not putting that pressure. And I don't know if there's any other mindsets that you have for people. I know we have a lot of listeners that are doing the SF marathon and the SF half marathon the same day that I'm doing the triathlon. And I know I've spoken to a few of those people too that are kind of having similar mindsets of if they put too much pressure on themselves, they feel like they're going to choke.
Well, something that I've been talking about, it's weird how things go, like there are themes throughout. Like I have a little group of individual clients that I work with, and it seems like, week to week we end up talking about similar things. So one thing that came up this week was this idea of fear. What are we afraid of? How does it help us potentially? Right? So what's the fear for you? Let me ask, what's the fear for you going into this event?
That I cannot finish the swim and I DNF.
Okay.
That's the fear.
So you get to decide how front and center you put the voice of fear. And you get to decide how you use that information, because what fear is actually doing, it's just a biological mechanism that's designed to bring our attention to something that is important or a potential threat. I guess it's possible, but have you trained for this?
Yeah. I've trained a lot, and I did the full race distance in the lake this morning without a wetsuit on.
Okay.
And I'll get to wear a wetsuit on the race day.
Great. So what's the problem?
Yeah, it's just, I think deep down it's like, it's always, I think it's hard to not, to kind of like turn down those voices. And I think a lot of times you're surrounded by a lot of people being like, oh, I would never do that. Oh, I would drown. And like, you hear a lot of those voices, you share your goals, and outside influences really start to impact a little, well, what if I screw up the swim? What if I freak out in the water and have to go to the life preserver or have to have somebody save me? It's like, I know logically I'm going to be fine. Worst case scenario, a backstroke and breaststroke the whole thing, which is not a bad situation. Worst case, I have to walk part of the run. But it's hard when you have the outside voices.
So as we talked about, I think towards the beginning of this conversation, those outside voices have nothing to do with you. When you tell people what you're doing and they're like, well, I would drown, you're like, great, that has nothing to do with me, right? Because you trained for it, you went through the process, you have to believe that you're ready. And here's the main thing going into a big event like this: break your goals for that event down to really small, very controllable things. So it's not about finishing the swim. It's about, how's my start? What's going to make the swim part successful for me? Okay, maybe I want a good start. How many people are doing it? Where do I want to position myself in that pack? I'm a swimmer. I can tell you that being relaxed as you swim is better. If you tuck your chin, you're more streamlined, right? So there are these little things that you can do. And if you focus your attention on that, you're not focusing on those outside voices. Mm-hmm. And if you break it down and you make it a mindfulness exercise, you're going to be done with the swim before you know it.
Yeah.
I would also say the rest piece, I know that's hard for you. That's a really important way of preparing to do this event. Preparation is one of the things that we control. There isn't much. Water temperature, the weather, how hot is it, the current, right? If you're swimming in open water, how many people are around you, who's around you? There's all this stuff that you can't control. And every time you divert some of your limited resource of attention to that stuff, you're taking away from what you actually need to do to successfully execute your race plan. So focus on the things that you can control. And if you have to sit down and like make a little list of that, go ahead. And then pick a couple of things. Okay, so you're doing 3 different events. So maybe it's 2 things for each event. What do I need to do the swim successfully? What's going to help me in the run? What's going to help me in the bike? And then that's where your attention goes, and you let the rest of it just happen because you have trained your body to be able to do most of it without you having to think about it. You've done the training. You got to trust that, and then focus on the couple of little things that are going to put you in a position to succeed, whatever that means to you, and you define that success.
Alicia, in distance running, we break things down into A goal, B goal, and C goal. Do you do that with triathletes or triathlon as well? Have you heard of this concept?
No, I've never heard of this concept.
It's really basic, and I absorbed it from just like listening to people who do these types of races, and I was like, this is awesome. So like a goal is like your number one. If everything worked perfectly, like the very best that could possibly happen. And for running, it's usually time related or pace related. B goal is like the next best thing. So like your A goal could be like, I want to finish my marathon in under 4 hours or something. Your B goal could be, I just want to complete it. I don't want to get a DNF. I could just want to do the distance. And then C goal could be like, maybe I DNF, but my C goal is just to have a really good time. Like I want to have fun out there. I want to make new friends. I just want to enjoy the day. And there's like so many different variations within that you could do. It could even be like 3 different time goals, like best time, medium time, not as good time, or whatever. But I like that because regardless, like you're going to achieve one of those goals, and you can feel proud about that. So it's like kind of a way of breaking them apart into different things.
Yeah, I've done something similar, but it's actually, I like the ABC versus how I was doing it, which was like best, probable, worst, and kind of like what are the 3 scenarios that could occur, and like, am I okay with the worst case scenario? Like, yeah, I'm okay with the worst case scenario. It's not that big of a deal.
No, ABC is better language too.
Yeah, I think that is a lot better language.
Much more positive. Have you done a triathlon at all before, or is this your first one?
Oh, I've done like 8 sprints. I've been focusing more on the sprints so I can balance it with the strength training, and this is my first, but I don't really know if I classify, not me. I classify that as endurance sport. Again, a lot of the outside voices say that's not real endurance. And so everyone's like, oh, this is your first real endurance event. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Stop.
I'm like,
yeah, but look, again, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I really like the ABC thing.
Yeah.
It also the way that it sort of makes sense in my head is like the A goal is kind of an outcome. It's a time, it's a pace, it's a place, it's a whatever. The B goal is kind of performance related, right? You're like, you have these little benchmarks that you want to hit. Like maybe even that's like a pace thing. And the C goal is a process goal, right? Like I want to have a really good start on all 3 events. That brings it back to the controllable. And the A goal is something that you don't have very much control over if it's an outcome. So that's not what you focus on. And the performance thing comes as a result of you executing the process.
I like that.
So that's another way to think about it.
I'm so excited for you.
Shoot me an email after you've done it, and let's
Yeah, for sure. I'll have to keep everyone updated.
Okay, well, this has been amazing. And I'm also taking some notes for my training upcoming for when I have my next event. Thank you so much, Aaron, for hopping on with us today. We super appreciate it. If people want to get in touch with you or are interested in working with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way to do that is to find my website, which is PLAYfreesport.com. You can also email me at the address is aaron@playfreesport.com. AARON. Email is the best way. I check my email more often than I probably need to, and I work with kind of anybody. Honestly, I don't do clinical psychology work, but anyone who has a performance question, anyone who is struggling with the mental or the emotional side of sports, coaches. I love working with coaches. I love working with parents of athletes, and you all had a great question in there about how do I tailor what I do to different age groups. The first conversation that we have will be free, so the first chat is always just an opportunity to get to know each other, and I'm just going to ask questions about who you are and where you're at, or if you're a parent and you're interested in getting some help for your child. Who is that kid? What are they dealing with? What's their background? What are they up to? And that's kind of how I do it. I try to meet a person where they are by asking questions and being curious and learning about them.
All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone who has tuned in today to this episode of the Nutrition Digest podcast. We will see you at the next episode, and we hope this has been helpful to you in some way. Thanks so much.